I played versus GOLDMADMAN, a top-ranked player on Tempest Rising's 1v1 multiplayer matchmaking leaderboards, and we were both Tempest Dynasty faction, where I attempted to do a specialist and call the guard support power rush build, while he went for a more standard infantry spam build and defeated me in about 10 minutes. So for your viewing pleasure and to talk about these builds, we can enjoy this match from start to finish. It was played on the Altitude winter map, and my start was a bit different than what I usually like to do, as I planned to try out the Infantry rush build with the Operative Sniper Specialist. For this reason I went with a machine shop, then a barracks to get the Dynasty Guards and send them to capture enemies' bunkers to cut him off from a Tempest Processing center on his side of the map. Because the Specialist Bureau costs a lot and requires extra power, I also wanted some Tempest Processing centers for myself, as they help with the extra credits and power. The reason I go with 2 power plants early on is to be able to keep using the Dynasty's plants at the command center. My other 2 Dynasty Guards were sent to protect my own Tempest Processing center. I also wanted to pay for the body armor doctrine, as I was going into an infantry rush, and that will help them out with extra HP. I must admit that being able to actually capture the enemy's bunkers took me off balance, as I usually fail at this and thought I wasn't up against a strong opponent. This is because I haven't memorized the names of the best players, and they have a habit of changing their Steam usernames. Maybe to prevent stream sniping, I am not sure. Anyway, at 2 minutes into the match, I had 2 Tempest harvesting rigs and 0 credits, as I was recruiting engineers, new rigs and constructing the Specialist Bureau. This was a mistake, and it didn't just cost me time, it made me make some misclicks and bad decisions later on as well, like overbuilding engineers for example. My decision was to pause the construction of the building queue to let my units finish so I could have more harvesters and new engineers. This was probably the opposite of what I should have been doing, but I am a sucker for capturing neutral buildings, as I love their extra benefits and often try to force opponents to fight me next to one where I can drop new construction buildings or turrets. I will show you a match in another future video where I did just that. Anyway, after constructing the Specialist Bureau, I just needed to gather 3000 credits for calling the guard, but at the same time I was spending these credits on new harvesters, infantry units and operatives. The very first contact with the enemy was his pillagers coming to clear out my bunkers at his side of the map, which even reinforced my opinion that I was up against a less skillful opponent, as pillagers have proven to be very hard to get good use out of in the Dynasty faction, and very few players ever use them. My doctrine for body armor was already being researched, and my first operative was close to being recruited by the 4th minute. I don't think this is as fast as this build can be done, so feel free to share at which minute you have 3 operatives and call the guard support power ready in the comments below. For me it was 4:30 with the ability, but I was running off without the 3rd operative, which was another blunder. I was hoping to research the training regimen doctrine before the first battle, so my infantry could level up, but it was probably the wrong thing to invest my credits into. At this point I actually spotted 2 Havocs rushing into my part of the map to probably take out my Tempest Processing center or harass my harvesting rigs. I decided to intercept, but now I think it was another wrong move, as I was chasing after one of the fastest units with infantry. I got one in a short skirmish, but only because my opponent called them back, and now he knew not only where my army was, but what it was composed of. A good player can figure out not just your tactic by seeing your army composition, but also your economy and base situation, as they know what it takes to build a certain army composition. Since I felt quite slow with no fast vehicles on my own, I went for a second machine shop and ordered up Havocs to be produced. Precisely because I had only 2 machine shops and 1 barracks building, I wasn't even spending all the credits I was accumulating, and this is called floating resources, meaning you have credits in the bank, which would have been much more useful as units on the field. I decided to at least use this money for researching more doctrines, but as I was getting close to the 6th minute at this point, I was very late in reaching the enemy base, and plus I had lost the element of surprise. I didn't even micro my units well, getting jumped by 3 Pillagers, another 3 Havocs and a bunch of Infantry units. I tried to micro some of them to scatter them so they don't die to an area of attack damage from the Pillagers and Havocs, but I was too slow and only left with microing the 2 Operatives trying to destroy the Pillagers first. Basically it was a terrible attack, and that was both late and badly executed. Left with a single Operative, I tried to get most use out of it by sniping the enemy vehicles, which is what these Operatives are best at because of their weapon. Not only did I know I lost the initiative and map control after this, but I had neglected to spend my resources and was floating almost the maximum amount by the time the first battle had ended. Since I expected my enemy to keep making light infantry and havocs, I wanted to get many Boar tanks next and crush his infantry units under their treads. I was also very aware I needed more production buildings and started to construct more. This is the part of the match when an enemy can overreach and attack your base with a limited and already damaged army he won the middle map engagement with. His supply lines are very long, while yours are non-existent as you're producing units right at your base where you can expect the attack. With some defensive turrets in place and careful micro, you can fend off this attack and buy yourself a few minutes of rebuilding time. This of course depends on your opponent's skill and speed of playing. Naturally, he was microing his infantry to avoid my Boar tanks, so my first attempt at crushing them only led to a few successes and losing the first tank. It was safe to say I was in panic mode, placing down anything I could, production building, turrets, support power for healing infantry units, but with the enemy at the gates and almost no units to stop him, it was going to be a hard fight. The problem with the Boar tank crushing infantry units is that it is a slow unit and it gets additionally slowed down when it does crush enemies. Then I noticed the Dynasty Guard support power being almost ready, and it was my last chance to defend my base. Here is where me not using keys for many of the commands is what cost me valuable time, and it is something I'm trying to make myself remember to do one key at a time. I mean, it even says so on the unit and support power cards, which key corresponds to what, so I'm really annoyed I have yet to start using them. I do prefer to use the mouse when I'm making tutorials and guides for new players, as it is easier to follow what I'm doing, but when I try to play multiplayer competitively, not using the keys is just costing me valuable time. At this point of the battle, you can see the effect of long supply lines for the attacker I was talking about, as I was able to rebuild my army right there at the combat line, while my opponent wasn't able to reinforce his army so quickly, which is probably why he decided to retreat and regroup. I noticed that our harvesters were touching elbows at the table full of Tempest up on the top part of the map, and since I already captured the neutral building up there, it was a good spot to do some harassment and take the pressure off my main base. Again, you can see how slow I am ordering new units by clicking on buildings instead of using the keyboard shortcut keys E, R, T, Y and U for the different building tabs, and then F1 to F10 keys for units. Of course, my opponent wasn't sitting still during this time, and not only did he rebuild, but also teched up to porcupine MLRS units. I was hoping to use this hill as a stronger position and hold it with a smaller force, but I made the mistake of thinking his infantry would have to keep climbing up and I would crush them on their way up with my Boar tanks. Honestly, I am not sure why he had sight on my units, maybe because of the Dynasty Guards in the front ranks. In any case, I only managed to crush a few of them, and a single bunker couldn't hold against so many missile troopers and now porcupine MLRS units. It is made up of a core of dozens of missile troopers, basically a spam army with a few vehicles like Pillagers, Havocs and later porcupine MLRS units. I might have had more success against them if I had used a combo of Igniter Corps and Matchsticks, as they do area of effect damage to clumped up infantry, but this time around I went for the Boar tanks and made a huge mistake. The fire damage of Igniter Corps and explosive damage of Matchsticks deals much more damage to infantry, which has no armor against fire and explosives. This is something I explained in my previous video about the weapon type attacks and armor resistance, which I will link up here as a card and down in the description. With the loss of my army and me being stuck in my base again, it was inevitable that my opponent would press me there again. But now that he was equipped with long-range artillery, there was no way I was going to defend my base. I attempted one more charge of glory with the Boar tanks, but they got melted by dozens of now veteran missile troopers. A few of these were even stuck at my buildings, not helping in the fight, which was just funny. Anyway, that was about it in this battle, so I hope you enjoyed it and learned a lot from it. Thank you for watching and happy gaming!